stand up. This week, or 2 weeks ago, what was it that we discussed in Romans? You guys remember?
Well, that's pretty cool.
I was going to say it was something near and dear to Anger's heart.
My daily Bible verse was actually in Romans today. Cool.
Viva la revolution. All joking aside, though, we talked about how talking about the deference to government and the authority figures that are placed over us and how they are placed there by God, and we are to be in deference to them. Yeah, exactly, Bob. I just see so many people typing. It's so distracting in Discord because I see who's typing, and I feel like I should wait. I'm not gonna wait. If I see something that's worth mentioning, I'll come back to it. But we're just
Brutal, man, brutal.
Yes, very much, Kessa. Context is exceptionally important. Yeah, there are definitely different interpretations based upon cultural and timeline um, uh, specifics. But that being said, Paul doesn't seem to give any real qualifications on his statement. They seem to be very broad and very sweeping without any conditions. So I'm not saying one way or another. I'm just saying, you know, that's what the Bible says. So we come to verse 8, and we're kind of continuing this idea of relating to others. We started off the chapter talking about those that are above us. Now we come to verse 8, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those that are around us. People, regular citizens like us, individuals, our neighbors. Does that strike you as interesting in any way, shape, or form? Just how that's how this passage starts. I'll give you a hint. It's the very first word of Kessa's previous comment. Yes, Bob nailed it. Context. Verse 7. Pay to all what is owed to them. Taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, and honor to whom honor is owed. And so we've just gotten through this idea of to those that you owe things, give it to them. To the point that now we come to verse 8, and Paul says, look, don't owe anyone anything. Just more of that building. Even after we've gotten past all of the foundational statements of the first 11 chapters of Romans, Paul is still like, you know what, we're building from here, we've come here, and we're just going to keep working with that. And no, doctor, you don't have to mark that one down. There's no then or anything, but it's just food for thought. Shut up. And so he says, don't owe anyone anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. Okay? So I'll throw this out. We all know that there are generally 3 Greek words used to describe love in the Bible. Which one do you think this one is? Yeah, I know you did, Kessa. I swear your browser has like a permanent tab open to that web. The 3 terms, I'll go ahead. That one, and that one. One of those 3. Okay, so I've got the doctor saying agape, I've got Everett saying phileo, and I got Bob saying eros. Okay. All right, Mario's right. Agape is hard to achieve by humans. Phileo is brotherly. That is correct. That's where we get the term Philadelphia. Yeah, if it's Bob's choice, we're all in trouble. I'll tell you that. It's not Bob's choice. So, from what I'm seeing, do we have a consensus on phileo here? Everett says yes. Doctor says yes. Well, I'm going to tell you, good job, guys. You're wrong. It is not phileo. This term is agape. Agape isn't fatherly love. Agape is divine love. It is a love that is completely unconditional. Regardless of what the object of the love does, you still show love to that person. It's the greatest way that we can put it is it's the love that God showed us. You go back to Romans 5:8, and this is the love that God showed us, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. This is agape love. Contra-conditional love. Hadn't really thought about it that way. I can see why you would say that. I don't know that I entirely agree, but that's pretty good. Contra-conditional basically contrary to whatever the object of the love does. That's how it is. I say unconditional because it doesn't change. It's not dependent. Contra-conditional is still dependent upon the actions of the person that you're loving. Unconditional is like, I love you this much and nothing changes that. It doesn't matter, doctor, since I told you not to write it down. But that's what we're talking about here, is this agape love. And the love here, unlike in the passage before where we're talking about a lot about taxes and such, when we're mentioning love, when we're mentioning loving each other, this isn't a one-time event like paying your taxes or paying off a debt. This is something that isn't you give and then you're done with it. This is a more of a flow. It's not like, here you go, here's my love for this. I've paid off my love debt to you. No, this is an ongoing thing. This is the nature of agape, in that it doesn't end. It's this constant outpouring. You could call it, and rightfully so, a lifestyle. And you continue along the passage, and you see that the one who loves another, this agape love again, has fulfilled the law. You want to talk about rattling the cage of some Jewish scribes and knowledgeable individuals? That statement right there probably blew the socks off some people that were familiar with the Old Testament and the Mosaic Law. The Mosaic Law had how many hundreds of laws and rules and regulations and everything that they had to follow, and then the Pharisees were adding to that in Jesus' day and all this. And Paul comes out and says, listen, the one who loves another, it's literally translated, who loves the other, particularly the one that you're loving, has fulfilled the law. You love someone with this agape, and you've covered the law. You're done. What? That's incredible. So in the instant that one shows perfect agape love, they are in perfect accordance with the law. And if you flip over to the book of Galatians in chapter 5, verse 19, Paul writes that for the whole law is fulfilled in one word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And why is that? Well, we could skip down a little bit and see, but the answer is because love will never wish ill or wrong to its object. We know from 1 Corinthians 13 that love always seeks the best. And God is the very embodiment of love. We say that all the time. God is love, right? And so if God is the very embodiment of perfect love, living in perfect love is being in harmony with God himself, and therefore the fulfillment of the law. Jesus said the exact same thing in the Sermon on the Mount. And he said it multiple times to different people that came to him. Jesus told the rich young ruler, or not the rich young ruler, they asked him what the greatest commandment was. He says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, strength. And the second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The greatest commandments. Why? Because everything else falls in line if you keep those. You with me, guys? Cool. Clear as mud. Awesome. So, and then, like we said, verse 9 and 10 just explain this a little bit further. And Paul's like, listen, you remember those laws? You remember all that stuff you had to learn? You remember your bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah? You guys had to go through all that? Do you remember how hard you Jews tried to keep every single one of those rules? Did it never occur to you guys that simply loving your neighbor would fulfill each and every one of those rules? And we look at the Bible and we think, how silly that is. How could the Jews have missed that? And we oftentimes give the Jews a lot of crap. But just think about how badly this would burn the Jews. I mean, really. Just think. Can you imagine if there were Jews living in Rome, in the Roman Church, and they're reading this, and Paul says this, you get the feeling that the Gentiles look to him and the Jews just have their face, their poem attached to their face. It's like, oh my gosh, it was so simple. How did we not see it? Now, if you guys remember, a couple weeks back, when we started chapter 12, we made the statement that that was really the start of the whole doctrinal section of the book of Romans. the first 11 chapters really about foundational truths and the history leading up to the church. But chapter 12 is when we really start getting some teaching, really start getting some commands from Paul. Well, here we go. Verses 8 through 10 of chapter 13. You've met the pinnacle of it all. It really is that simple. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, do you notice anything interesting about what Paul says in verse 9? He says the commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. Do you notice anything interesting about those commandments?
You wouldn't do those anyway if you loved.
True, but where do those commandments come from?
God.
Yes, correct.
No, I mean literally, like they were like the difference between them and the rest of the 10 Commandments and the rest of the other Mosaic laws.
Thank you. Yes, 10 Commandments.
One was spoken by God and heard by everyone, and one was
Yes.
relayed by the rest were relayed by Moses. I mean, the 10 Commandments were spoken by God, heard by everyone.
Yes, so they did come from the 10 Commandments. Let's get a little more specific than that. What numbers of the 10 Commandments are they? Ah. Okay, now we're starting to get somewhere. Bob says 5 through 10. And obviously there aren't 6 of them here, but yes, they are the latter commandments of the 10. And if you guys have studied the commandments, what do you know about the division between the commandments? Now, Bob's already laying it out. Yes, the first 4 relate to God. They define the relationship between God and you as an individual, whereas the latter 6 are relation between you and others around you, individuals, other people. So stuff like, honor your father and mother, and don't kill anybody, and don't lie, and don't steal, and don't murder, and don't covet. And so what we have here is Paul isn't saying that loving your neighbor as yourself is the key to all the commandments. He's making this very clear that what he's talking about here is in relation to others. Because every time that he references it, he's talking about someone else. And that kind of gives a clue as to where we're going with this passage, since last week we talked about authority, and this week we're talking about neighbors, those that we interact with on a daily basis. Now, let's also be careful that we not put the cart before the horse. Because if we think back to the books of Exodus through Deuteronomy and the numbers of times that we saw the law, we know that it dictated like loads of ways for the Jews to treat their neighbors. But what did the Jews do? They broke them. That's true. But why did they break them?
They had false gods.
Yes. What did the Jews focus on, though?
Depends on the day of the week, to be honest.
I think Doc's picking up where I'm going. They focused on the action, the commandment, instead of the spirit behind it. So God's given all these commandments to deal with your neighbors and to treat them properly. And the Jews got so caught up in doing the commandments that they missed what the commandments were trying to point them to, and that was to love each other. And the lesson in all that is this: you can dot all the I's and cross all the T's when it comes to how you should treat your neighbors. But if you do that, that does not mean that you love them. You can show all the generosity and you can be as nice to them as you possibly want. But these acts, these works that come out are not the sign, are not the way to love them. You love first, and then out of that love you act. We talked about this several times. We talked about this in the book of James. We have covered it in a number of places in the study. Ooh, Kesso with the done. So that brings up an interesting question. So if we love our neighbor first, and then we act out of that love, and we always want the best for our neighbor, why does Paul keep giving new commandments about how to treat our neighbor? Never wondered that? If we're automatically supposed to be treating our neighbor well and we love them, why is it that we're constantly getting told or reminded of things that we're supposed to do, or told other things that we can do? On Earth. Wow, okay. Number of really good answers here. Excellent answers. Yeah, our love isn't perfect. You're right. We do suck at it. And so I think it's a twofold reason. The first reason being, remember, this is the evidence of your love and a constant reminder, if you truly do love them, then shouldn't you be doing this? But at the same time, I think there's another reason. Our love doesn't make us omniscient. If I could perfectly love, Doctor, for instance, but if I experience this perfect love for him, that doesn't mean that I know everything about him. Loving someone without being informed or sensitive to their needs doesn't really do them a lot of good. So these commandments, I think, are given so that we can act out our love in greater and increasing ways. If we truly love our neighbors, then we truly care about them and we want the best for them. Again, 1 Corinthians 13. And if that's true, then knowing the best ways to completely care for them allows our love to be more complete. If a displaced Christian comes to you and is looking for a place to stay, be hospitable to them. They have nothing. This is a way that you can demonstrate your love to them. This is the exact same kind of thing. The Christians might not have known, what was going on. They might not have heard. News didn't travel as fast back then as it does now. And so what Paul's doing is he's making the church aware of a way in which they can show love. It's a way they can act out and be more committed to this perfect love that we are called. Did it go down? Are we still here?
I'm still here.
Okay. All right. Apparently Discord is hiccuping. Okay. Yeah, I did see a few people disconnect. I thought I said something offensive.
I'm still here. Don't worry.
All right. And so then Paul cleans up that passage here, or verse 10. He says, love doesn't do any wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. So just echoing what we've already covered. Any questions, thoughts, concerns?
I got a thought.
I'm listening.
It's a little well, no, I just find it interesting that we're having this conversation now, today.
Really?
Washington Post released a thing. I shared it on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it. Basically, in a poll by Pew Research, white evangelical Protestants were the demographic that were most unwelcoming to the idea of refugees. And just thought it was interesting that on the day that happens, we're here talking about loving the neighbor and loving each other.
Must be a coincidence.
Must be.
As I've said many times before, a coincidence is merely an event in time when God chooses to remain anonymous. All right. So we made it through the first 3 verses. And so Paul then takes on a little bit of a different tone as we tackle verses 11 through 14. Can I get someone to read those? As we're still having people bounce in and out.
Yeah, I'm looking at their API and their gateway, and it says 99.7%. So they're having server issues.
Okay, well, we'll deal with it.
Which
Don't need to
verses?
focus on that. Which verses was it? 11 through 14.
Besides this, you know the time, the hour has come for you to wake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we first believed. The night is far gone, the day is at hand. So let us cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us walk properly as in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy. You said to 13 or to 14?
14, all the way.
But put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the fleshly to gratify its desires.
All right. So that feels a little different because we've just gone from this idea of talking about our relationship with our neighbors and loving them most specifically to suddenly this whole idea of Paul talking about, look, you guys know what time it is. It feels like he's like waxing poetic. And you're just kind of like, well, where did this come from? So I have a question first off. Disregard, doctor's not in the channel. Okay. I was going to ask him that post that he made. Was he making it in response to Discord having a fit, or was he making it in response to the upcoming passage? Because both answers are acceptable. So let's ask a question. What do you guys think Paul's talking about here? Verses 11 through 14. What in the world? What's Paul going on about? Because he like completely drops the idea of loving your neighbor almost entirely, and then is like, and just starts on a completely different topic. Ongarth, we have many people in the channel that are trying to volunteer you to give them the answer.
I'm just trying to determine if it actually is that different, because I see in verse 9, you shall not commit adultery, and, sexual immorality and orgies are bad. It says don't murder and steal or covet, and, there's a bit later in the later half about quarreling and jealousy. It seems to be just a different angle on more or less the same thing.
Okay. All right.
This is intentionally one of those Ongarth style trick questions. Why did he say that? Why did he do that thing? And the answer is he didn't.
I don't mean it as a trick question. And yes, for those of you that are interested, I do know that the clock says 10 o'clock. Suck it up. Ongarth, you're not leading. Stop with the trick questions.
Bible study envy.
Ooh, Kessa, I just noticed your statement. This is similar to 1 Thessalonians 5. Why would you say that? Kessa has picked up on what we're laying down. So, bit of a historical lesson here. Most of the apostles, including Paul, in much of their writings, it appears that they believed that the second coming would occur during their lifetimes. That Jesus's ascension from the earth would not be long. That within their the span of a normal lifetime, they would see him come back. And so Paul's initial statement says, besides this, you know the time that the hour has come for you to wake from sleep. Oh, Ongar's got his hand raised. He disagrees with me. Cool. Use a mic, you heathen.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I do think though that there's the imagery being used here is interesting. Back then, you wouldn't go to war and do battle at night necessarily. I mean, you do like assassination attempts and raids and stuff, but like the actual fighting happened during the day. At night, the soldiers would kind of relax and do their own things, and which usually revolved drinking and doing other things. But then when the day came, they had to be in good enough shape to be to go to battle and to fight against the enemy. So I think what Paul's saying here is like, hey, like the time for all that stuff that's past. That's in your past life. Like you're now gonna be. This is now the time where we have a job as Christians. We serve Christ as soldiers of Christ in the sense of our duty is to go out and to wage war by love, by loving our neighbors, by loving those around us, and by spreading the gospel that way.
Okay. I definitely agree with you, and I say that you're right. I would ask a second question to follow up on that one to you. What do you make of the second half of verse 11 then? For salvation is nearer to us now than when we first believed.
Stand by. I'm trying to locate a Bible because I was trying to run 2 windows on a mobile and it wasn't working.
Oh no!
Complaints and excuses. Call
Nice.
on one. I do this.
It's actually a trap. He's getting a study Bible.
Yeah, the MacArthur Study Bible. So you know
I was gonna say, does it say Ryrie or MacArthur?
No, just kidding. This is the not knoweth Jesus version.
Oh,
The what version?
the not knoweth Jesus version.
Ah,
I don't think that necessarily counters my stance because it says
No,
salvation
I'm
here
not
and now
saying it
for
does.
slaves, which is true by default.
I'm just wondering what you make of that. What does it specifically aim at? What's he referring to when he says that?
But our time to accomplish the mission is limited. And that there's a time clock on it, which there is, and it is limited.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Okay, and that's fair. All right,
is it though?
I think it is.
Something about every tribe, nation, and tongue. I think that it's contingent on that. Wouldn't you say?
Sorry, I think I missed a step.
Yeah, same.
I mean, if we're talking about time clock until the end of time, Revelation does talk about the scene in heaven where people of every tribe, nation, and tongue are there,
Yes.
which means that we have at least until the gospel has reached every tribe, nation, and tongue.
People have been notoriously bad about underestimating how long that would take.
Yeah, it's true. And to be fair, the world as they understood it was a lot smaller than it is now. Most of what they considered the world was the expanse of the Roman Empire and slightly beyond for the barbarians. I mean, Philip was it Philip? No, which one went east to India?
I believe that was Thomas.
I think you're right. Actually, it was Tom. But yeah, they did go in all directions, and understanding that could certainly cast the idea of could cast Acts 1 in a completely different light, in that they went to spread the gospel in such a fervor because they wanted to see Christ again. They said, "Hey, let's get the gospel out to everyone so that we can see Jesus again." Just a thought. Darn it, Ongarth taking shots at dispensationalists. So Ongarth, he nailed it. Exactly. The war, this refers a great deal to spiritual warfare. The night is far gone. You know, we don't do our own thing anymore. We are called by the Savior. And many times throughout Scripture, we see the contrast of light and darkness. We see it in Colossians. We see it in we see it in Ephesians. Just time and time again, we see the idea of light and dark, the contrast of we were once children of the darkness, now we stand as children and sons of the light. So let us cast off the works of darkness, as Unger said, those things that the soldiers would do at the nighttime, and put on the armor, again, the idea of going to battle, the armor of light. And verse 13 is interesting. Let us walk properly as in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy. And we look at stuff like that and we think that feels kind of self-explanatory to a Christian. I mean, if you ask any one of us, if we would say, hey, these things like orgies and drunkenness and sexual immorality, are these things that you think a Christian should be involved in? I would like to think the vast majority of us would be like, yeah, probably not. We should probably, not that. That would be NLT. Okay.
Yeah, that's one I always use.
Josh, go ahead.
You said, why would Paul need to remind the church of this? My question would be, have you been to a church, and how often do they need to be reminded of very obvious stuff? It just seems like we're just picking on them because we perceive
we're good
ourselves
at
to be
that.
good at that. We
Really
perceive
good at that.
ourselves to be good at what they're bad at.
Yes, that's certainly one part of it. I think it also speaks to a certain amount of cultural relevance. Because if you flip over one book, like advance one book, you find out that the First Corinthian, or that the First Corinthian, heaven help me, the Corinthian church was having a few issues. And Corinth was a cesspool, essentially. But I think what Paul is doing, and some commentaries kind of back me up on this, is the idea that the culture of the day within the Roman Empire was exceptionally pervasive. And it was so powerful, and it was just so accepted that it often had the potential to seep into the church. And so what Paul's doing is essentially galvanizing the church, saying, hey guys, that was stuff that you did in the night. You are now in the daytime. You are different. You are children of the light. That is not what you participate in anymore. That's not you. That's not who lives in you. And so that's why he says, put on the Lord Jesus Christ. That harkens to Ephesians and the armor of God. And don't make any provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. That kind of sounds a little bit like the Corinthians and the whole idea of, the meat to sacrifice to the idols. But this is the idea, in that the church is Paul is calling the church to be counterculture. And the culture was strong. I mean, the Roman Empire was everywhere, and you the idols of the Greeks, you have emblems of that everywhere, and a lot of debauchery and a lot of terrible things that were occurring in the name of the gods of the Greeks and the Romans. And a lot of these activities, as people were saved, they weren't aware of that these things were necessarily contrary to Christianity, or they thought they were okay just out of ignorance or being uninformed. And Paul's saying, no, those are contrary to what you came from, or that's contrary to what you are now. That's what you came from. You are something completely different now. You can't be the same that you were. That's a good way of putting it, Kessel. They felt so normal. It felt natural. Because of the culture, they had to be shaken out of it. Oh, Onger's got a raised hand again. Here we go.
Sorry, two military things from my being a student of military history of this time that I think are interesting here. Number one, the word provision.
Mm.
Provisions are what you'd bring with to keep something basically alive and in fighting shape. So they're saying, don't bring no provisions for flesh. Yeah. Yep. Bring no rations for the flesh. So, like the sinful desires, starve it. Don't bring that don't give it enough to keep it alive. Don't give it enough to keep it happy, because that's not your friend. That's not one of the allies here.
Okay, good.
Don't feed it.
I picked up on that one. Don't feed it.
Yeah, don't feed it.
There are a number of Baptist anecdotes on that one, but we'll skip it because Onger's given a far superior one. All right, second.
The other thing is the night is far spent. Soldiers, if you could catch the enemy before they were totally equipped and in position, a much smaller force could completely rout a much larger force. So the worst thing that could happen is, like, the other guys roll up on your camp as you're still getting ready. So because of that, the legions and the soldiers would get up before the crack of dawn and be in their armor and ready to go by the time the dawn rolled around. So Paul is saying the night is far spent. So the the day is at hand. Basically, like the time to get ready and to stop doing this stuff is right now.
Right
like,
now.
yeah, yep. There's no like, well, we can let it go on a little bit and get rid of some of this stuff gradually. It's nope, stop it right now because like we're in it right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Ongirth. Excellent stuff. So what can we take away from this week? So what?
You don't love your neighbor, so you need to get that love somewhere else.
Yeah, that's the fun part about agape. Supernatural. That doesn't originate within us. What else, guys?
Twice as many people, but they're still like just as quiet as it was like 3 years ago.
I mean, pretty much the whole channel is muted.
Come on, man. You're the High Priest of Ekron. Of course you're going to say a little bit.
Is it auto muting you guys or something?
No.
Okay.
Rob's just being a jerk.
I was taking a nap through the early part of this.
And I think the second half of the passage, it's a real clarion call. Can't wait to make a change. You have to be ready. Christ, we are told that we don't know the day nor the hour. And who knows what the next day itself will even bring. There have been times where I've gone in, gotten up, gone into work, and it feels like the world is completely fallen apart. And if I'm not ready, if I'm not equipped with, with the Spirit of God and a ready word and His love and His grace, and with what He has for me that day, I'm going to fail that battle. And so I need to be ready in and out. Because we are, as humans, tremendously short-sighted. We have no idea what's coming the next moment. But it falls to us to be ready in season and out of season, always ready for whatever situation comes at us because we have the Spirit of God within us. And you know what? Nothing catches God by surprise. Any other thoughts, guys?
Why are there 2 rocket chairs?
Because one is
Vroom,
recording. He's sitting in one and his legs are propped up on the other.
That only raises more questions.
That was the goal.
I have comments. Not questions this time.
All right. Any other thoughts? Last call, guys, before we close out. Okay.